Hey everybody, welcome back to the Union 0430. It's Damien. I'm here in Kingston with Mark, just outside the Ottawa Valley, or just outside the nation's capital in Ottawa Valley. We got Philly down in Oshawa, and we have a scientist on the show tonight from Ducks Unlimited Canada, my old office buddy, Mr. Kyle Burrowman. Kyle, great to have you on. Hey, and I just gotta say that this is episode 40. This is the actual episode 40, not last week when I said it was episode 40 and it was actually 39. This is 40. Kyle, great to have you on the show, buddy. How are you?
Good. It's great to be here, Damien.
Yeah. So Kyle, so Mark, Phil, Kyle is the invasive species guru for DU Canada here in Ontario, and Kyle, you know, overseen a huge project in the Kingston area for a couple of years, the Water Chestnut project. He's now moved on. He's a bit of a big deal now. He's a scientist, biologist, all this good stuff. So so I thought he'd be an excellent person to have on the show and sort of talk about the invasive species. I know we've talked about it off camera, just the bunch of us, but I thought Kyle could come on and probably educate some people, and so here we are. So Kyle, invasive species, tell us all about it. What is an invasive species?
Sure. So I guess maybe the best thing to do is to get right down to a textbook definition to start, and then we'll kind of break it out from there. So invasive species, you know, typically it's something that, you know, you don't really want around because it's invasive. But why is it invasive? So typically what we consider those to be would be a non-native species whose introduction into a new area or its spread into a new area can cause negative impacts. And so that's a negative impact to the environment, to the economy, or even to society. So I guess, you know, not every non-native species is going to be an invasive, but it's going to have reasons why it can compete really well, and cause you know, some kind of detriment, I guess.
I need to let the audience know, the millions and millions of listeners that we have. So Kyle is there's my wife in the background. Yeah, go by.
Hey, Trish.
Photobomb.
Everyone's saying hi, Trish. So I've got to preface this to everybody, just so you understand. Kyle is one of the funniest people I've ever met, but he will totally geek out when he starts talking about plants. So,
oh yeah,
big time geek out on plants. He loves it. So we'll do our best to corral him when he starts going too far into the weeds. Unintended.
You know.
All right. Yeah. So sorry, Carl. So the invasive species, you know, you broke on. It's not a native plant to the area. So I guess the biggest thing, especially here in Ontario, that we've seen, and Phil and Mark, we've talked about it, and with Ryan and Dave, and we've actually seen people do this. Kyle, is the Phragmites, which is, you know, a plant that seems to be taken over a lot. We're seeing a lot of people We're seeing them in a lot of places, and we're actually seeing people use them as camouflage. So they're bringing them from one area to another to help grass in their blinds when they're going hunting. What can you tell us about the Phragmites in Ontario?
Sure. Well, Phragmites is one of the worst aquatic invasive plants that we have, probably the worst one that we have in North America. We do have, it is actually a species, and I'll try not to get, I'm already getting too geeked out here, Damien, but it is a species that they can consider it to be cosmopolitan in the sense that it's found on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. So that's kind of neat. But the invasive one that we have here in North America, basically it can just take over and choke out areas pretty quickly. It grows really tall, really thick, and really quick. So what you see are these plants that can grow up to 5 meters or 20 feet. I'm not so great at my conversions, but it can grow really, really tall, really quickly, and basically choke out the other species there that are beneficial habitat for ducks and other waterfowl and other wildlife. And it's kind of interesting too, because it's one of those plants where what you see on top of the ground is really the tip of the iceberg. 80% of the plant is underground. And so it's just this massive root system that's able to kind of suck up all the nutrients in the water. Smaller ponds can even disappear from it. And I realize I'm getting far off the question of what we can do for it, but it's good to know a little bit about the biology of the plant, and it can grow from fragments of the roots. So that root layer, you can actually move those around to different locations. Each seed head, so you see those really nice seed heads. They're really pretty. You see them in pictures. Looks nice. You see lots of wedding photos with them now and stuff, and maybe not noticing what it is, or you see it driving down the 400 series highways in Ontario, for example, and it has that big bushy seed head. But that's thousands of seeds that could potentially move to a new location. So when it comes to say outfitting your blind or even moving between places, it's best not to use Phragmites in the first place. So trying to avoid setting up your blind in there, or even using, like, cutting down the reeds and using them for the blind itself, because it can really exacerbate the issue and displace our native sedges and rushes and cattails that provide habitat and food for waterfowl. I guess the other thing you can do too, and so the other thing too is, like, trying to avoid it at all costs, but making sure you clean off your gear between moving from site to site. And this will just try to keep everything local. That's kind of the, some of the best ways that you can tackle it.
So one of the things I wanted to touch on is that, so obviously in the case of Phragmites, and like I said, we're starting to see them a lot more around us. And from DU, from a scientific standpoint, like you said, they can choke out entire, ponds or watersheds or whatever it is you want to call it. But how does that, and I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but that has a direct influence, obviously, on waterfowl, right? So I don't really know exactly how I want to put it, because I don't think people understand just how serious this type of species of plant is, and how it can affect the waterfowl. There's a question in there, but I don't really know how to ask it.
Sure. I guess maybe from personal experience, growing up in southwestern Ontario, it was just commonplace. It's something from when I remember being in high school and using it for blind material and not realizing, how much of an issue it actually was. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where moving to Kingston, when I moved to Kingston for this DU job, after spending, I've been doing invasive species control for about 10 years in different facets across the province, and I could totally geek out for probably a whole podcast series myself, which no one would listen to. But but there's like one of the most interesting things when I moved to Kingston was driving across the Cataraqui River and seeing an actual cattail wetland that was virtually intact, whereas growing up in southwestern Ontario it wasn't as common because you see that expansion happening a lot earlier. So in a lot of ways, like, it's just been, in some places maybe seems naturalized, but it causes very, very detrimental issues through to the environment and also to hunters as well. There was actually a case back in a couple winters ago. I don't know if you heard about this, but 3 hunters out in Utah that were hunting like out in a Phragmites stand and ended up having some equipment failure where they got disoriented where they were out kilometers from shore and trying to get back to shore. Their waders had ripped through from some of the, the grass has a very sharp edge on it as well. It's like, not something you want to go running through. But they got lost out there as well and had to get evacuated. And luckily they had enough service on their phone that they're able to call out. But it's kind of like the Wild West in a sense. When you get in the middle of a stand, you can easily get disoriented and lost. But it limits our ability to access the water and hunt and and just enjoy the area that we've enjoyed for years.
How does it affect the waterfowl themselves?
Sure. So probably the biggest things are loss of habitat for species that use, say, cattails and bulrushes and sedges for nesting, for nest building. As well, like if they have rest stops or, like if there's if Phragmites is taking up smaller ponds, there's less open water for, say, stopovers during migration and things like that. And then there's also trickle down, like a lot of the impacts are, it gets complex. And so it's, you have these really complex food webs where, with Phragmites and other invasive species, you might have a reduced number of invertebrates that are available, or say eelgrass or, other species that are beneficial for ducks for feeding. And so really like impacting kind of the quality and the amount of food that they have available. So in that respect, you could end up having, say, reduced, more time spent looking for good protein, with different invertebrates and things like that. And the birds themselves are, they don't have as great a fitness for that migration and, or reproduction, things like that. So they might spend more time trying to find that really good food that's displaced by these plants.
Oh, I got a question for you, Kyle. Like, and obviously, like the Phragmites is like the huge topic right now. But like, whatever happened to purple loosestrife?
Sure, purple loosestrife's still around. The one thing about invasives is once they're here, they're really hard to get rid of. And so one of the big stories with that back in the 90s, there was a very successful campaign releasing a couple of beetles that are like a biological control for purple loosestrife. And so, it's one of those things where we had really, really high numbers back in the 90s. The insects did their job. And I could go on about biological control as well quite a bit, but basically, there's a lot of research that goes into it, so you're not releasing the wrong thing. But they were very successful in knocking back the plants. It didn't get rid of them altogether. It's just now kind of naturally cycling between having, once the populations go up, the beetle populations go up as well. And you do have these natural cycles that happen, but it's not as big of an issue as it was.
Like, I remember actually being a part of like a purple loosestrife, I guess, eradication project, where down at the mouth of the Rouge River, so right where the Scarborough Pickering border, the whole marsh down there was all choked out. And this would have been, I guess, probably back in the 90s or so. And we went down there out in like canoes and we were just yanking clumps. And then I guess we dumped it, like this is like going back 20 plus years ago. But yeah, we're yanking them out by canoe, chunk after chunk, and I guess there was a dumpster there or something, or we just left them in the parking lot to be cleaned up.
Mhm.
But I remember like that was like the huge thing back then. Like everything was about, purple leaf strife, and now it seems like, it's, I wouldn't say it's under control, but it's better than what it was. And now Phragmites, like where I live up in the top end of Oshawa, I can drive down some of the side roads, and like the gutters in the side of the road are choked out. And my little 6-year-old, Daddy, there's Phragmites. I'm like, yeah, man, you're gonna tell me. They're everywhere.
Oh yeah, and actually that's a really good point, Phil. So the for invasive species as well, like Phragmites, they really they're able to grow typically in a lot of different areas. So they've got this competitive advantage. So they can grow like, in relatively deep water to dry sites. And so they have a really big range of area that they can grow. And because they move in quickly, and with a lot of invasive plants, at least, they usually do well in degraded or, degraded areas. So think like roadside as well. They're able to grow in those areas where you have really high salt conditions, maybe.
Yes.
You have salt coming off the roads, and they do better than our native plants that aren't used to that. So yeah, like they're just so good at what they do. It's almost, it's irritating. I'd say like, I was trying to think of like a good example of how to explain, like invasive species, and I don't know if this is a good one because I live in Kingston and I know there's a lot of people who love the Bruins, but like Brad Marchand, like, he's such a pest, but like, he's so good at what he does, and yeah.
They're like Brendan Gallagher.
Yeah, you can pick whatever team, whatever player you don't like. And it's kind of that thing, they find this niche, they're able to maybe, kind of stretch the limit of what they can do compared to what some of the competitors can do. And I mean, love it or hate it, they're good at what they do, but for the most part, unless they're on your team, you don't really like them.
Yeah, Kyle, like, so what is it? Like, so Phil's brought up purple loosestrife, and we've got water chestnut and Phragmites and whatever. Like, why is it so they're not native to our area, but yet they come in and they can just multiply crazy? What is it that allows these invasive species to thrive?
Sure. And so I guess, part of that too is that, it goes back to not every non-native or exotic species becomes invasive too, but it's these ones that for some reason have this competitive advantage. And so, in a lot of cases, they're generalists, so they can live or, thrive in different areas. They can, usually they can reproduce really well. So either they reproduce quickly, or in the case of plants, like let's talk about aquatic plants, because I do enjoy talking about aquatic plants more than most people, likely. But they can typically grow, like you have these things that can grow from seed, but they grow also from vegetative fragments. So like little fragments, say Eurasian milfoil, for example, or, even like Phragmites with the roots, they can grow different ways, but you have, fragments of Phragmites or sorry, of Eurasian water milfoil or starry stonewort, or, a handful of them. These fragments can get hit, they can move around and grow a new colony just from a small fragment that's chopped up from a boat motor. And so they're just really good at reproducing, and they can move pretty quickly. So that also helps them spread around too. Like if they're able to kind of grow from those fragments. Other things too, like in some native plants do this, but they have, some of them will release chemicals as well. Like they call it allelopathic, chemicals that, for Phragmites or garlic mustard, which is one that we have in the springtime in our forests. They will release chemical compounds into the soil that will deter other plants from growing. And so they can change kind of the soil chemistry and things like that, or the water chemistry around them. And so they're just super good at what they do. It's like taking, let's just say like me, for example, you know me, I'm not the biggest guy, but I'm a pretty decent hockey player in my in
Yeah.
my league, my men's league. I probably wouldn't do well in the NHL, but like put me with a bunch of Atom kids and I'll probably crush them. I would think like I could probably fit in too, because
Sort of
it's
like
we're like the same size, but
like when Kramer was taking karate lessons, right?
yeah, it's along those lines, and it's so like they have some advantage over the other species that they like our ecosystems have evolved in such a way that it's very complex, and certain species become these specialists where they can only say, let's talk about Eurasian milfoil. There's or milfoils. There's a milfoil weevil that can only feed on these plants. It can't survive on anything else. So once like these other plants start to come in, things like that, you have it makes it difficult for these species to kind of compete with these generalists that can take over. And so it does cause, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, just it and that can lead to reductions in like native species that we have, and it's one of the biggest, behind habitat loss, it's one of the biggest impacts that we have on biodiversity across the world.
So, I don't want to dive too much into this because you're on the science side of DU, and then there's obviously the fundraising side. But the beautiful thing about your job is that the fundraising side, they do their job so that you can do your job, right?
Right.
So in the case of DU, that they have so many projects that's on the go, and right now the big push on securing that waterfront on the Great Lakes and making sure that doesn't get developed and all of this stuff. And I want to tie that into this invasive species, and I'm not looking for a hard number from you, but obviously for you to take care of the invasive species and the invasive species program and the education and the amount of work that takes up a fair amount of the fundraising dollars, right? Like face it, like you need money in order to do your job and to do the reclamation and to fix areas that's been taken over, right? So when we're talking, waterfowlers and when they want to know, okay, hey, listen, where does my money go when I go to a dinner and I buy and I bid on the print or the set of steak knives from DU? Where does my money go? And your program is just one of those, programs that has the draw from that fundraising, correct?
Yeah, and so most of the work that we do collect, I wouldn't be able to speak to the specifics for numbers. We do get a little bit of money that comes our way for invasives from fundraising and stuff, and a lot of that money too is sometimes local and directed. So we've had personal donors that have supported our water chestnut program right at the dinners, had written us checks to help keep our program going. And I mean, we wouldn't be able to do it without the fundraiser support.
And also I want to jump in, but even the OFAH, they jump in as well, right?
Sure. And so there's so when it comes to, I guess, DU being a nonprofit and OFAH and our partners, we all kind of work together. And personally, before working for Ducks Unlimited, I had worked with OFAH as part of their invasive species awareness program. And we all, us, NCC, the Invasive Species Center, we all kind of help deliver these on the ground efforts, alongside the federal and provincial governments. So, like a lot of, we all kind of do different things and we all complement each other. And a big part of that is that education and awareness. And through the Invasive Species Awareness Program, they do handle, say, the reporting aspect of things. And, if kind of that information stuff, Ducks Unlimited, we do a lot of the invasive species work that we do it's directly related to waterfowl in one way or another,
Yeah.
typically. So wetland or upland. So in Ontario, we're doing stuff with water chestnut, which is, a species that's only in a handful of spots in Ontario. For our listeners all across the eastern seaboard of the US, you likely seen it from the Chesapeake Bay north. There's Ducks Unlimited out in Saskatchewan and Alberta are doing stuff with more like upland species that impact waterfowl. So it'd be like common burdock and tansy and a few different species out that way. And actually, what's kind of neat, they use cows and goats to feed, kind of work with farmers to feed on those. And so it's kind of like, if you want to start like a rent-a-ruminant company, you might be able to make some money dealing with invasives. So you know what they say: if you can't beat them, eat them. So
Nice. So listen, tell us how they get here. So I don't know the story on Fragmite. I do know the story on water chestnut because I shared an office with you and I had to hear it every day. But
absolutely.
But for the people that's listening, like how do these things actually get here?
Sure. And so if I'm remembering correctly, there's kind of two main ways. So there's intentional releases, and then there's accidental releases. So intentional would be, in a lot of aquatic plants fall into this neighborhood where they would be plants that were really cool ornamental plants, and they were released on purpose because of that unique look, or if people brought them as they came to Canada from their home areas, and then like water chestnut was one of those. It just looked really cool, and so they thought, what, this thing isn't going to become a problem, so let's just put it few ponds, and it had escaped and became a huge issue. Not to stay too Ontario centric, but we have 180 non-native species. I've got an unstable internet connection. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. But we have about 180 non-native species in the Great Lakes, and so Phragmites was one of those that was brought over from ballasts of ships. So Phragmites, if I'm remembering this correctly, was in the soil that they used in the early 1800s to fill up the ships, so that when they're crossing across the Atlantic, they were able to stay upright, and then they would just dump out all of the dirt when they got to this side, and so it's suspected that the seeds or maybe some rhizomes had made their way over, and this one genotype of Phragmites from Britain became a huge issue. And so, it's the same thing with ballast water with round goby and zebra mussels and spiny water flea and, those 180 non-native species that we have in the Great Lakes. And so there has been some efforts. I think it was 2005 when there was new shipping, they do change the way that we ship and things like that, so that you're not accidentally introducing new species anymore. So it does kind of trickle down that way, where it changes the way that we do trade. And I know the Canadian Food Inspection Agency does a lot of inspections. They're kind of for things coming into the country, they do a lot of work just to protect our our crops and our natural resources in that respect.
So in my hometown, back in Newfoundland, they did a project there a few years ago where for sewage treatment, they created these ponds. And what do you think they used to treat the sewer? What do you think?
Likely Phragmites.
Phragmites.
Yeah.
So now there's these, and this one particular road in town, it might be on a couple of them now, they have these ponds set up and Phragmites growing in them. So they intentionally put it there for this purpose. And I'm wondering now, because I've seen it in Ontario. Since I've been living in Ontario, I've seen what Phragmites is and what it does. I'm wondering if when they did this, did they even look at that side of what Phragmites is before they planted that?
Yeah, and it'd be difficult to say, like it's like it's good at removing nutrients in some respects, but there is some pretty terrifying damage that it can cause. I'm sure, maybe at this point they're aware of that, and hopefully there's regulations in place to deal with that happening in the future. Try to stick handle around that. I don't really, yeah, I don't know. Like there's good intentions always, and sometimes that's, can lead to some of the major issues that we have.
What about I know there was talk that there was gonna obviously people are always trying to figure out a way, how are we going to get rid of them,
Mhm.
what are we going to do, and there was talk, I believe, down in the States, down in the US, they had found a environmentally friendly spray, so an aerial spray that was environmentally friendly, that showed some pretty positive results on Phragmites anyways. How is that something that's being looked at in Canada, or is that a little bit too, we don't want to dip our toe into aerial spraying?
Yeah, and this is one that it is an interesting topic, because it is something we manage things differently in Canada than we do in the US. And so we have one overwater herbicide that's registered for use, and that's diquat. And so this one diquat isn't the type of herbicide that works for Phragmites. It's a contact herbicide, and it just kills what it comes in contact for plant tissue. So, there has been a pilot study that has been going on with Nature Conservancy, and DU has been a partner with this as well. And the Ontario government with a Phragmites spray project at Long Point in Ontario. And so really in an area where you have acres upon acres of Phragmites that has basically choked out this really important biosphere where we have these species at risk and everything. And so there has been a project to treat that using an emergency use of glyphosate, which is like a product that you can use, but it's not something that's regulated for all the time use in Canada. So it's really for this emergency use, and they did knock it back. There's ongoing research as well to look at kind of, the larger picture of how this, how it's going. But for the most part, like, that's not typically the response that we're going to be using. It's, using in Ontario. There's a few different things too. There's no real silver bullet when it comes to Phragmites. And so, there's ongoing research with that, as well as with, different efforts with cutting. It's very labor intensive to deal with stuff along shorelines. And so, anything that's in water, you just really have to be careful, because it's a very delicate balance, and there's a lot of checks and balances that have to be covered before, that kind of work's going on. And, and there's also some research, we're starting to do some research into releasing some moths that can be used as a biocontrol. And so there's about 20 years worth of laboratory work, ahead of the releases that happen this year. And so we're working with, with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and University of Toronto with this. But it's in the early stages,
Yeah, no, cool. Mark, Phil, I know you two have personally educated people, I guess, when it comes to Phragmites and stuff, and because I just think that some people don't truly realize just how fast and how quick they can reproduce and take over. For the average duck hunter, what do you guys say to them when you see Phragmite? Like, do you make it a point on, if it's somebody that you've never hunted with, do you make it a point to point out these plants and educate people, when, especially the young people that you take out on their first hunts and stuff?
Well, I think like I haven't so much. Like there's been some people where, like, they've posted photos on social media saying, "Hey, just grassed up this new blind I got. It's not looks awesome." And it's just like, whoa, whoa, pump the brakes here, sunshine. That is an invasive species. And not everyone is up on this sort of thing and
That's right.
as educated as others. Like I was fortunate, like Kyle and I actually went to college together, for not directly together, but we were at the school at the same time for a period of a year, and learned about invasive species. And I learned about this stuff as well as in some high school courses that I was taking. And just through, the repetitive education of learning these things and being able to, properly identify these species and knowing its impacts. Like it's one thing to be a waterfowler and, knowing some of the stuff. It's another to actually have, like, a background in education in these things, which I partially do. So in seeing some of these things, like I even like my little guy, my 6-year-old, that stuff right there, Dylan, that's fragmites. That stuff's bad. And like, so we'll be driving around, he'll point it out. Daddy, look, fragmites. He's like, yeah, man, it's bad stuff. It's choking out the wetlands and whatnot. Like, if the opportunity arises, I wouldn't hesitate to say to someone, like, look, that's some bad stuff, man. Like, stay away from it. Don't touch it, because these seeds, they will get into everything. And then you start transporting stuff around and these seeds fall out somewhere else. And like, as Kyle mentioned, like, this stuff will grow everywhere. Like between, deep water to near dry soil, it'll take over. And, you got to do your part as, as conservationists and so on to, pass on this education to other people that are unaware. Say, look, this stuff is killing our wetlands. This stuff is choking out habitat. It's choking out waterfowl, like, and a multitude of other species that benefit from these, wetlands and so forth. And, we got to be vigilant. We got to be on top of this and, do our part to hopefully, reduce the spread of these things.
Mark, I know personally, I know you take quite a, you're pretty proud about the education that you pass on, especially to the young hunters. Is that something that you talk to them about? I know when you talk about waterfowl identification and gun safety and stuff, but do you actually talk about invasive species?
No, and now that you mention it, that's something that probably should be brought up in the future for the youth programs we get involved with, for any of us.
Yeah.
Just as a bit of education, just to
Yeah.
pass on the information that, this is invasive. Don't spread it around. Don't use it for your blinds. Don't stay away from it if you can, so you don't get the seeds. And it's just like Phil said. I mean, in keeping that, like, we're all on social media and we see it from time to time. I've seen experienced waterfowlers use it in their blinds and then drive it all over Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and these are people that know, they know
Yeah.
that fragmites is invasive, and they still do it.
Right.
But you can try and educate. You can't
Force.
You can't hold everyone's hand, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think, having that as part, and I don't mean that there has to be a full blown lesson, but when you're driving down the road, just like what you're doing with Dylan, Phil, you're driving down the road with your son. Hey, you see that's not good. We don't like that plant. And it could be something as simple as that, is just getting the word out there. And it is, in my opinion, and I think you guys will all agree, but it is our responsibility just as much as it is DU's and the government's or anybody else's to take care of this, right? And if at the grassroots level, another pun, Kyle, at the grass,
Yeah.
I'm on fire. But at the grassroots level, at this hunter level, it needs to start with us. I would think so. Kyle, I'm curious on how often waterfowl hunters, and it doesn't really need to be waterfowl hunters. I guess anybody that's out, that's walking, hiking, boating, fishing, whatever they're doing out in the wetlands and out in the area, you know, are people actually calling in? Because if I know my area right now, if there's a strange plant that's all of a sudden showing up, I'm going to notice it. So if somebody is constantly using the same area all the time, are people actually calling in and saying, hey, listen, we're seeing something squirrely happening down around here? Does that actually happen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so part of that is really that, you know, what you're talking about with the education piece. And so, you know, within Ontario and even, you know, just experience going across, you know, working with agencies in the US and Canada, there's always a big push for that, uh, prevention and response, you know? So really like hunters and people that enjoy the outdoors and you're out every day, like you're the ones that are seeing the changes. It's not the, you know, the people that are sitting in the lab, and it's not the people that are doing the outreach and education, you know, like it's the hunters that are there noticing the little differences. And not just Ontario, like every state and province tracks invasive species. And so, you know, it's just a matter of going to the government website or partner websites and just type, you know, a quick Google search, and you'll find out where you can report these things. So, you know, for us, we use EdMaps Ontario, which is our online database. You can use iNaturalist too, if, you know, for people that are, you know, it's more with it's like a wide range of different species that you can say that you've seen in different areas and stuff. So not just invasives, but they link together. If you were to put a report in there of something that looked funky, and I know this from experience working with OFAH, we would get these reports, and then what we do is we verify if they're real or not. You know, if it's, you know, if you called about a megalodon in Lake Ontario, likely, you know, there's no prehistoric shark that's kicking around. So, you know, it's not going to be, you know, verifiable. But say, you know, water chestnuts found in a, you know, you see this funny looking plant, and it is a really, you know, it is actually a really cool looking plant. Uh, but it's got these diamond shaped leaves that look unlike anything that we have in Ontario for, you know, plants in our, like floating leaf plants in our lily pads and everything. And so if you see something weird like that, you can take a picture, upload it through this database. It'll go to an expert who's able to verify if it's true or not. And then also you can use it through an app on your phone or load it on the computer. It'll use your GPS location, you know, your location services, so that if it's found in a place that we already know it doesn't exist, right away, the Ministry of Natural Resources is notified through a protocol that, hey, look, we found water chestnut, or we found hydrilla. You know, shout out to my Southern Ontario or Southern US folks that have to deal with hydrilla on a day-to-day. That's a beast if it ever gets to Ontario. But here's me geeking out about aquatic plants. But you know, you have these plants that there are things in place so that we can get out there. And kind of the idea is this early detection and rapid response. So you want to detect it early, and then that way you can respond quickly to get rid of it. So, you know, it does come down to the hunters and the people enjoying the outdoors to, if you see something that looks strange out in the wild, let us know. And you can do that either, you know, through EdMaps, really, or if you're outside of, and that covers most of the US as well as half the provinces. And then there's also, if you're in New York, they use IMAP Invasives, which is kind of the same thing. Just Google what your fish and wildlife agencies are using in your state or province, and they can, you know, assist you. I'm sure we're international too, but I unfortunately don't have much knowledge of how they track invasives elsewhere in other countries and continents. But
that's a good point, like that you brought up. You know, with us being in Ontario, and then a lot of stuff being Ontario centric on the show, but you know, it's all across North America. You know, obviously we're dealing with the migration of waterfowl that starts in the north, makes its way all the way down through the south. So this isn't just a Ontario problem. This is Canada wide, US wide. what happens in one country is bound to happen in the other, especially with the amount of hunters that are crossing the border and hunting in different places. And the Great Lakes is a prime example of that. So real good information for everybody, especially and not just people that's in Ontario. So, you know, I guess it's our due diligence from the show, from people from us, from the Union 0430. This is our due diligence in telling everybody, listen, that we've got to start taking this serious, because if you know, right around here where I am, I can look, and I've only been living in this area for 5 years, and I've already noticed areas that are getting choked off, right? That started out small, and now, you know, in the case of Phragmites, they're at least 6-7 feet tall, if not more, and totally overtaken an area, right? So I just want to switch, not really switch, but Invasive Species Week is coming up, and DU, obviously this is a big thing for Ducks Unlimited Canada. You know, what exactly, and I know we sort of kind of touched on it, but what exactly is Ducks Unlimited Canada doing to try and curtail these invasive species?
Sure. And so Invasive Species Awareness Week is kind of the last week of February, and it's a chance for, you know, the different organizations and everyone to kind of engage on social media. And we have a big push, and it's not just in you know, we lean on Canada and the US. We work a lot across the border, and we lean on each other for, you know, these campaigns. And also, you know, like when it comes to a new plant that we're dealing with, or say Michigan's dealing with, we lean on each other to learn about these you know, these different plants, that, because like you said, like, you know, everything can kind of move. There's no borders when it comes to plants or other invasives and things like that. And so, you know, we work closely with our partners and get a chance to kind of spread that awareness about the issues of invasives. But beyond kind of our awareness campaigns and everything, you know, what we do is we do active control on the landscape. So in some ways, like with our water chestnut program, which started in 2014, every year we go out and we were successfully reducing the amount of water chestnut that's present every year. And every plant's different, so you have to have a different set of tools to deal with every plant. So with that one, you know, it's really hand pulling and removing them before they can drop a lot of seeds. And we're able to do that because we've kept it nice and small. With things like Phragmites, it does get tricky, and there's, you know, different tools that you have in the toolbox. But in addition to doing some active control, we're also interested in, you know, we've got some work in research that we're doing. We're also doing some mapping and things like clean equipment protocols. So we do a lot of work when it comes to our wetlands. You know, we do a lot of restoration and rehabilitation work, and, you know, fixing our water control structures that we have. And so when we do that, we let our contractors know if there's any invasive species in the area that they need to be concerned of, and then some practices that they can take to ensure that we're not going to spread things around. So, you know, we do things kind of on multi-level, and then there's also, you know, working with our federal and provincial governments and other agencies, and you know, it's a multi-pronged approach, I guess. And even you know, we did some work controlling parrot feather, which is, you know, I could go on. It's a milfoil, so I could talk for hours about that alone. Anybody who likes milfoil, give me a call. I'm sure there's lots, but you know, like even between our Ontario office and our BC office, they're dealing with that, and you know, had some successful campaigns out in kind of the Richmond area. And you know, we talk across the board, and you know, it's all just kind of information sharing and gathering. So
what if let's say your name is Damien and you own a property and you have a potential wetland type place on your property and you want it to be optimized for waterfowl. You want to help create a habitat. What if you start seeing Phragmites growing in your property? Like if he was to contact you and say, what can we do? What do you do? What do I do? What's the route we're going to take now? What should we do?
Sure. That's a really good question. So what I would personally do first off would be to kind of direct. So the province of Ontario has put together like a best management practices guide, which would be kind of the best place to start. And it kind of lays out everything that you need to know about the plant and the different types of management based on the size of the infestation, where it is, and things like that. You can get that through ontarioinvasives.ca. So I'm just going to throw in, I mean, we all have long names, but it's Ontario Invasive Plant Council. And this group creates these different guides on how to manage these plants, as you know, Phragmites and a bunch of different ones. And there's some new ones that they've put out as well for other aquatic invasive plants and things like that as well. But yeah, once you start seeing it, you happen to see it everywhere. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the cannoli scene with The Godfather when they're out kind of in the middle of the reeds, and that's all Phragmites, and it just blew my mind when I noticed that. It creeps into every part of your life, it seems. Kind of like, I guess, invasive species creep into every part of our ecosystems.
Yeah,
It's everywhere. You see, the size of the highways get cut here in Ontario every summer a couple of times, and they go along with their tractor and their mower and they cut right through the Phragmites and then keep on going off the highway, cutting and cutting until they get to the next patch of Phragmites. They cut through that and that's contributing to the spread of something that's already been put there, right? Because they're cutting through the seeds and everything and just spreading it on up the side of the highway.
Yeah, it's tough to watch at times, for sure. Like and there's other species too. Like, it's not just Phragmites as well. And I know, like, I guess out your way, or not, Mark, sorry, Phil, out your way with dog strangling vine as well is one that you're starting to see a lot of too. Yep. And this would be more of a one that you see in woodlots and along open areas. And yeah, I mean they're just so good at what they do. And so really it's if we can prevent the movement and we can really it's that prevention in the first place. And then if you can't prevent it, dealing with it before it becomes a huge issue is really the best approach.
Yeah, and like the biggest issue with some of these invasive species is it's survival of the fittest, right? Mm-hmm. And they just completely like the Phragmites, they just dominate and take over and choke out everything in its path, and it just keeps going from there. And as like Mark said, like some of these cutting programs, like you think you're doing something good, well, that lawnmower is just sucking up seeds and they're spreading them from here down there. It's it's a losing battle, right?
And I guess that's Phil, something that I guess we need to try and do a better job of, as well as when it comes to the education. We've already touched on it a little bit, yeah. But the average guy that's out with that tractor and that's just mowing that down, he doesn't know, right? But you would expect that. I don't know what the name of that ministry, but the Department of Highways, you would expect that those areas would be somewhat cordoned off or at least told to these people. So, there has to be some education down to the lowest level, right? And so the guy that's operating the lawnmower, he needs to know. The 16-year-old that's going out for their very first hunt, they need to know about this. And when it comes to, and listen, I totally get it. I understand that after a long day hunting, and having to clean gear and already have to pack away all your gear and clean your gun. I never clean my gun, but the last thing you want to do is have to, go through all your kit and go through and washing this and washing that. But it is a necessity, and if we don't get a grip on these species taking over, it's going to become even more of part of your routine, if you like it or not. So it's probably best to get a grip on it now, before it gets too far out of control.
Yeah, at the end of the day, who's sterilizing their boat, their motor,
That's right.
their decoys, their waders? Ain't
Yeah.
nobody.
No.
And that's the hard part, is it's really hard to implement. It's hard to do that. And as someone who has, especially when it comes to the boat and stuff like that. And so, if you're not traveling around as much, if you're staying within a localized area, try not to move to too many locations. If you are, having a boot brush in your car that you can just scrub, just getting in the routine is kind of the big thing. But
Yeah.
there's other stuff too that you can do, just with gear. So, and I mean, seeds are just such a pain, but trying to knock all that mud off, because it'll have seeds and things like that. But even when it comes to, say, your decoys having more of like an elliptical, shaped or like a slender weight that's not going to grab onto the weeds as much, or just making sure you got the weeds off, and being aware of, kind of what's in what areas as well, and just doing your best to, do your best. That's all you can really ask.
That's a good point about the about your Texas rigs and those weights. Like that would make a huge difference, I would think. If you're using those diamond shape or those mushroom weights.
I won't show you the ones I use.
No, but seriously, but obviously, Phil, you know what you're dealing with, and you're not out, in your personal case, you're not out moving this stuff around, right? Because
No.
you already know what you're looking for. But
And I'm OCD, and I don't want that crap in my boat.
yeah, but if you're using those, say, mushroom weights, and I've done it, like I've pulled, and Mark, you've been in the boat where I've said, let's just get the decoys in, and we'll square it away once we get home. I don't know how many times I've said that. Just pull the decoys in. I'm mad at the dog, or I'm mad at something. And I just, you know what I mean? I just want to get the hunt is done. The hunt is over. I'm pissed off. Let's get this stuff in the boat and let's get home so I can crack a beer. So that it happens, and it's hard, Kyle. I can only imagine.
Yeah, and you know what? Even with that, Damien, there's with boats, and to kind of pull from, like we hear it a lot in Ontario, and I know they do across the Midwest and in the US as well, and clean, drain, and dry your boat. And it's kind of the same thing with your gear. If like a lot of aquatic plants, for example, can't survive for very long out of water. Phragmites is obviously a different one. You're likely not going to have Phragmites that is all caught up on your anchors or anything.
Yeah.
But the ones like Eurasian milfoil and things like that, they do, if they dry out in the sun, they can die off pretty quick. So if you're able to dry your equipment and and keep it out of the water long enough, and just out of a damp area, then it does the duty too. And like there's nothing worse the end of a day, a long, skunk day, trying to, sit there and think about all the plants. I mean, other than me, but like, to sit there and like, pulling weeds, like, come on. I get that, but it's just a matter of, like, it's like the little things, like recycling and things like that. Like it's just every little bit counts, right? So, yeah.
All right, fellas. Well, we're at that magic 60-minute mark, Kyle, buddy, and I cannot thank you enough. I know this was the highlight. Like this is the best Thursday night in a long time for you to be able to spend an evening talking invasive species.
Oh, it's been an absolute blast, and yeah, I mean, any chance I can talk about invasive species on end and people are actually interested in hearing, possibly. It's hard to tell with your faces, but I'm assuming that you're, still enjoying it.
Hey, I love it.
But yeah, we'll have to get you out in the boat, and it's fun to get out fishing because mostly what I'm catching is weeds, and I'll tell you all about it. So maybe we'll get you out in the boat this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there's a new DU project that was completed last spring that's close to my area here, and I would really love to get a good tour of that area, because I've heard it's pretty impressive, especially with the water controls that's put in there and stuff. So I'd really love to get out and see that and get a tour from you guys and that head engineer you got in your office, because he's just brilliant. You can I'm sure you'll let him know that you were on the show, and I'm not going to say his name by no means, because that's just
I'll be sure to I'll be sure to be but no, it's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show too, Damien, and happy to be here.
No, thanks so much. And again, it works out really well, Carl, that we were chatting, because it ties into the Invasive Species Week that's coming up in a couple weeks. And to get that word out there and just try and educate a little bit more, because I think that's part of our responsibility, as I've said before. So we'll just go around the table, and by no means, fellas, if you have more questions for Carl, we can keep this going, but if not, we can call her there. So Mark, anything, buddy?
Oh, good meeting you, Kyle. It was some good information. I know a bit about it, but I obviously definitely don't have anywhere near the knowledge you have on the subject. So it was good to pick your brain and listen to what you had to say. It was good having you on.
Philly?
Yeah, appreciate you coming on, Kyle, and imparting your wisdom upon our millions of listeners. I just hope for anyone who's watching this, like when we release the show next week, or even down the road, that hopefully some people will take some part of this episode and put it to use, and think twice about how they move and how they act out there in the wetlands and so forth.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, Phil. So Carl, just to give you a little bit of a background, so obviously the show, we'll have some pretty hardcore hunters on. We'll have industry insiders and people that within the industry that are providing supplies, companies and stuff like that. And we've had some pretty amazing guests on. And when I reached out to the boys a couple weeks ago and said, hey, listen, I've got a buddy of mine that's the invasive species guys for DU. What do you think about getting them on the show? And everybody was like, 100%. We need that. This is something that we definitely need to talk about. So I understand, and we've been joking about Kyle geeking out and stuff like this. And I understand that maybe it's not the most popular topic when it comes to hunting, but it is a pretty darn important topic. And I'm glad that, Kyle, I'm really glad that you agreed to come on and hang out with us this evening, because I do know that you are a very busy man, and for you to take some time out on this Thursday evening to hang out with us and talk about this, it is really appreciated, buddy. And I hope that we can have you on again sometime and have you talk some more about it.
Yeah, and like you said, it's probably the best Thursday night I could have, and I'm happy to be on the show. I do listen quite a bit, so it's good. Good to be a part of it.
And Kyle's actually, hey Mark, so Kyle's actually hunted the water behind the house. He's done it before, but he done it last fall too. So he came out one day with another one of our buddies. I don't think I was home that day. Or I was, I can't remember. Anyways, you got the guys hunted it anyways. They shot at some birds and stuff. So it was all good. Again, everybody, we are as advertised, no shiny bells or whistles. Just honest to goodness, good friends that love hanging out and chatting anything waterfowl hunting. And we're just really just trying to educate and trying to learn as much as we can in the process. Any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us here. If it's something that we don't have the answer to, which will probably be 95% of the questions if you ask, I will send you off. I will give you Kyle's contact information, and you can reach out to him through email. And trust me, he'll be more than happy to chat with you. And with that, this was episode number 40 of the Union, everybody. That's it. Big love. See you all next week.
And
What?
remember,
Wow.
we don't pay for followers because we're all broke.
That's right.
And only you can prevent forest fires.
That's right. All right. See you all next week, everybody. Thanks for listening.